My question is, when when you receive any feedback during user testing and the user expresses a new need, does that is that like, I think, what is the fine line between that new discovery with the
Yeah,
core pinpoint that you've
yeah.
discovered during the problem space?
A really, really good question. I'm going to share my perspective, and I would love any of the mentors to share. A big difference between product, like how product managers and designers work versus, let's say, maybe customer facing teams work. And I'm going to draw the analogy that way. Customer facing teams are trying to solve one problem at a time that's coming from the customer. A bug comes, the customer comes in with a bug. The customer support team will try to fix that bug for that user, for that customer, right? Customer success, a customer comes in or user comes in, has a problem using the product, or maybe wants to leave the product, not renew. The customer success team will solve it for that customer. The product teams, designers and PMs, we cannot make decisions on a user by user level. We have to start looking for patterns because we are trying to solve for our overall customer segments. And again, it'll depend from phase to phase, stage to stage, whether you're trying to solve for the mass market, all of your customers, or you're trying to solve for one tier versus another tier. That's a separate issue, but we don't solve for one single user. So when you get that feedback, either through email, either through a tool, either through user testing, either through user interview, you record it and start seeing, well, have we heard this more? Is this just one user, or is this generally something? We need to act on patterns. We need to think in patterns and then figure out whether we need to act or not act. Briefly, that would be my response. So not everything we hear, whether it is a stakeholder ask or a customer ask, we need to act. We need to think, map it, and find if there is a legitimate pattern, and then figure out the best way to figure out how best to act. Does that answer, Veline?
Yeah, to a large extent. I think the reason is because during the user testing, the four persons interviewed, they all wanted the same thing. But I guess my question basically is, does that have any impact does that become a pinpoint, or it doesn't? It's something that you take in. This is a great feedback, but did they even enjoy or appreciate the experience for the MVP or the wireframe that was shown to them to solve the actual pinpoints that we earlier discovered? So it's like, this is the problem, this is the wireframe we think will solve that problem that you have. And during the testing, you discover that, oh, I would really want to have feedback, from a teacher or something. But yeah, that is great to have, but like, let's remain focused on like what the pinpoint is from the very get-go.
Yes, and sometimes it could be that when you have majority of your users coming up and asking for a certain thing, which is very painful, you may have to figure out, well, do we need to adjust? Because I think unlike project management, where things are pretty kind of done and defined, when you're trying to build products, it's all about adjustment, right? And you have to still figure out, well, is this doable? Is this usable? Is this viable? Is this feasible? Because we'll always have constraints, right? So yes, you're not going to just immediately say, okay, 4 users said that, so let's kind of ditch what we have all of this research done, and let's just act on incorporating that. But you will consider it and then discuss with your stakeholders, with your team, and figure out whether that is to be done. There is no direct answer. Priyanka and Rakshit, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I do want to add. I think that's a great question, and that has happened so many times.
Yes.
Oh my God, it has happened so many times in real life. The first thing I would say is, you want to go back and say, are we asking the right question? A lot of the times that has happened, at least to me, that I've realized, A, I'm not being clear to them when I'm asking. B, I'm not asking in the right way. And C, maybe the wireframe that you provided, or the MVP, is solving the first pain point, and now there's a second pain point that's coming up. So this is when you have to decide, because they didn't realize that you had so efficiently solved the first pain point, now they're going on to the second pain point, or the first pain point was never a pain point and the second pain point has been the biggest one, right? So there are different things that will happen, but it's all going to, if nothing was there, which is the bigger pain point they have? The recommendations, which for you guys, that second I think came up, or was it the initial one, the real-time conversation? Right. And I think when you get that feedback, you say, okay, if we just provide you recommendations and not have this real-time conversations, will that be good enough? And if they say, yeah, I think I don't need this real-time conversations, I just need recommendation, I think that's perfect. You partially have that answer. But then they would come back and they might say, oh, I don't know. If they say that, then, so that's part of the testing. When you get another feedback, you have to change your questions. You can't just stick with the script that you have at that point and say, oh, this is what we had agreed upon. But hey, like, you didn't know that there was going to be another feedback. So when you get another feedback, think of it as is it 1 + 1? Is it 1 or 1? Is it 1 or 2? Like, I think you just have to go around that point, that time, and say, okay, what is more important? And more than that, why is that important? Like, why is the real-time conversations very important? Or why is the part of getting recommendations very important? Like, what are they trying to get out of? Getting recommendation is actually a solution. So they're telling you that I want this feature, but nobody's talking about what is the pain point of that. That's not a pain point. Getting recommendations is not the pain point. Pain point is that I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, or I keep using the wrong words. Nobody has corrected me. So exactly, it's our job. Right. So again, so if that's the thing, then if that's the pain point and that's the bigger pain point, then you might want to shift. But if that's just the pain point coming up after looking at the new solution, but not before the new solution, then it's time to think about it. Like, is it the real big pain point, or this is like a secondary? So this could be like, oh, okay, P1 is adding recommendations. P2 is adding this. Like, having this transcript, now we can elaborate. Now you're talking about how the product can go next step and the step further. That's how I would deal with it. And not just because they're saying it, we take out everything and say, oh, all the work we did, we leave it, and now let's try adding it. Because as soon as you try adding a recommendation solution, trust me, your solutions is going to be so different than the initial MVP is going to be. Now you're going to struggle with saying, oh, we have to match both of them. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but with the time constraints, with the technology constraints, you want to keep all that in mind and say, is this the right time to do that? If you were doing it with no time constraints, no budget constraints, no technology constraints, by all means, go for it. Take top 3 pain points and go for those solutions. But in real life, I don't think that's how it works. So you want to go back to saying, okay, for now, this is what it is. And then go back to the founder and say, we have also heard this. And this could be a great add-on that we can have. And if not an add-on over here, maybe add-on somewhere else, or an add-on that you can provide a different feature or a different solution. But you are giving that data to the founder, and that's very valuable to him. As a product manager, it's not always about giving solutions, but it's also about saying, these are the different options, right? Like, you can provide that. And that could be your roadmap, saying that, okay, the next roadmap is, once we have this, this is what we have heard, and this is what we have heard. So